Hey everyone, so you're back for more, huh? Seems like you can't get enough of all this relationship talk. And hey, I get it. I mean, who isn't fascinated by love, loyalty, and all that messy stuff? Especially that big question. Is love really enough? Like, can it actually stop someone from, straying?
It's a question for the ages, right?
Totally. And we're diving deep into a podcast that tackles this head on. It's called Love versus Loyalty, the cheating debate. Get this. Their first episode is literally titled, Is Love Enough to Prevent Cheating? So, are you ready to unpack all of this?
Let's do it.
Okay, so right off the bat, the podcast hosts, they do something kind of brilliant, I think. They don't just jump into the debate.
What do they do?
They actually take a step back and define their terms. Like what do we even mean by love? Because let's be real, it means different things to different people.
Oh, absolutely. That's so important. So how do they define it?
Well, they actually bring up this psychological theory, Sternberg's triangular theory of love. Ever heard of it?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. It's a classic. So remind us, what are the three components of love according to Sternberg?
Okay, so there's intimacy, passion, and commitment. And the hosts argue that, get this, you need all three of these for a relationship to be truly strong and lasting.
I like that. It's not just about the initial spark, it's about building something deeper.
Right, and they don't stop there. They also take the time to define cheating, which, surprise, surprise, is also more complicated than you might think.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's obviously physical cheating, but is there more to it than that?
Exactly. The hosts point out that emotional cheating, like forming a super deep connection with someone else, can be just as damaging to a relationship.
I think a lot of people would agree with that emotional intimacy can be incredibly powerful. And if it's happening outside the relationship, it can definitely be a threat.
For sure. So with those definitions in place, the podcast dives into this whole romantic ideal, the idea that true love conquers all. Like if you truly love someone, hurting them would be like hurting yourself, so cheating is unthinkable.
Yeah, that's a pretty common belief, right? Like love as this impenetrable shield against infidelity.
Exactly. But the podcast doesn't shy away from the fact that the real world is a lot more complicated than that. They bring in actual research, like one study that found that couples who reported really high levels of emotional intimacy were, in fact, less likely to cheat.
Interesting. So there's some scientific support for the idea that love can, at least to some extent, protect against cheating, but
But there's always a but, right?
there is. Because as much as we might want to believe that love is this magical force field, the podcast reminds us that it's just not that simple.
And they drive this point home by sharing real stories from listeners who have faced these exact dilemmas. They've experienced love, betrayal, all that gray area in between. And let me tell you, their stories will make you question everything you thought you knew about love and loyalty.
The human element is so powerful, right? It's one thing to talk about theories and statistics, but when you hear real people's experiences, it hits differently.
It really does. So after presenting all these different perspectives, the podcast brings in a relationship expert, like the voice of reason, to weigh in on this whole debate.
Okay, I'm always interested to hear what the experts have to say. What was their take?
Well, their main point was that even when there's tons of love in a relationship, communication breakdowns and like unmet needs, those can create cracks in the foundation.
Yeah, it's like cracks in the foundation of a house. If they're not addressed, they can eventually cause the whole structure to crumble. Doesn't matter how beautiful the house is on the surface.
That's such a good analogy. So what did the experts say about communication? Any practical tips?
Actually, yeah, they emphasize that learning to communicate effectively is like super key. And they even gave a specific tip. Practice active listening.
Ooh, I love a good actionable tip. So what does active listening look like in practice?
Basically, it means really focusing on what your partner is saying, trying to understand their perspective instead of just, waiting for your turn to talk.
That's so important. It's so easy to fall into the trap of just planning your response in your head while the other person's talking. But that's not really listening, is it?
Not at all. And the expert also talked about the importance of trust, like love and communication. It's a crucial element in building a strong, resilient relationship.
Right. Have you ever been in a relationship where a lack of communication or trust caused problems? I know I have. It really makes you realize how essential those things are, maybe even as important as love itself.
Absolutely. It's like building a house, right? Love might be the foundation, but communication and trust, those are the walls and the roof that make it a home.
I love that. So after all this discussion, all these different perspectives, what's the final verdict? Like, does the podcast give a definitive answer to the question, Can love alone prevent cheating?
Well, the hosts have this really interesting back and forth. They go back and forth, weighing all the arguments. And their final conclusion is that love is super important, no doubt. But it's not enough on its own.
So it's not a solo act.
Nope. It's more like being in a band, they say. You need all the instruments playing in harmony to create beautiful music. And in a relationship, those other instruments are open communication, understanding your partner's needs, actively building trust.
Such a great analogy. It takes more than just one powerful emotion. It takes a whole orchestra of factors working together.
Right. And that's what makes this whole topic so fascinating. It's complex, there are no easy answers, and it really forces you to think about your own experiences.
Totally. So what do you think? Do you believe that love alone can prevent cheating?
It's a question worth pondering, that's for sure.
Definitely. And if you're interested in learning more about communication in relationships, the next episode of Love versus Loyalty explores something called nonviolent communication, which sounds super interesting.
Oh, I've heard of that. It's all about communicating in a way that's compassionate and empathetic, even when things get tough.
Exactly. Might be worth checking out.
Definitely.
All right, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. And until next time, keep those conversations flowing.
And remember, relationships take work.
They do.
Yeah.
But hey, the good ones are worth it, right?
Absolutely.
See you next time.
Bye, everyone.